Hello everyone and welcome to this latest video discussion as part of the RICS Tech Partner Programme. My name is Andrew Knight and I've been with RICS for over 13 years now. My current role is to sit within our thought leadership and analytics part of the organisation to look at the effect of data and technology right across the built and natural environment. And with over 110,000 members working worldwide right across that full property life cycle through land, planning and development, construction, brokerage, valuation, building operation, portfolio management, building surveying, etc. It's a very, very wide canvas upon which data tech and increasingly AI is having a very profound effect. And indeed, our members work across all the major asset types, whether that's land itself, residential, commercial in all its forms, alternative assets and infrastructure. So once again, very broad canvas upon which data and tech is having a great effect. And today I'm really pleased to have Charles join me from NCG and Caleb from Brave Corp. And perhaps if I could start with you, Charles, and just ask you for a bit of an introduction, a kind of backstory and a thumbnail sketch of NCG, if that would be okay.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Andrew. So my name's Charles. I'm from NCG. I'm Internal Sales Director. So I look after all of our largest clients. We work across the real estate industry, providing integrated tech solutions to commercial real estate. So sectors like build to rent, urban logistics, flex, and traditional real estate.
Thanks very much. And Caleb, moving to you, your background and indeed your kind of relationship with NCG.
Yeah, sure. So Caleb Parker, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Brave Corporation. I've been in Flex for 17 years. I should say I've been in office for 17 years. A lot of that has been Flex. I host a podcast called the Work Bold Podcast. It focuses on the future of office with a focus on space as a service. In my career as an operator, we worked with NCG, and now as a landlord and operating partner for equity, we work with NCG as well to help deliver the tech stack and backbone of our buildings.
Excellent, excellent. Well, if I can start with you, Caleb, actually, because as you say, Flex has been with us, in fact, well before COVID. But I mean, as an operator and someone who's, got extensive relationship and experience with landlords, what are the broad trends that you're now seeing in these years since COVID, building on that backstory?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear. I say this a lot on my LinkedIn and social channels that Flex is on fire. Kind of reminds me of that Kings of Leon song, actually. But the desire for flexibility from people in general is driving demand for what I call space as a service. And I define space as a service as providing the ability for someone to choose the exact space they need for the exact activity they're needing to perform at the exact time they need it. And pre-COVID, everyone could work from home, technically. But post-COVID, we've all experienced the benefits of being able to work anywhere. And now we need our spaces to be ready for us when we choose to use them. And we want to go to places where we feel like we belong and we feel taken care of. So what it does is it puts a lot of pressure on owners and operators of office real estate to care more about the customer experience, which means real estate's becoming more operational and hospitality-led.
Indeed, indeed. And I guess almost same question to you, Charles, in terms of your perspective. What have you seen, and what other things can you add to what Caleb has given us there as a perspective?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think historically we've seen a few large players dominating the market. So the IWGs of the world, TOG, Fora, Workspace, and people like that. Whilst I reckon that is still the case, there's a lot of smaller companies and startups and more established brands entering the sector. So we've seen ex-WeWorkers setting up their own companies, so taking over spaces or buildings that WeWork are vacating. NCG, we've been looking to migrate a lot of those sites for some of our existing and new customers. Then there's some startups we've seen, companies like TradeStars, who are kind of changing the setup that we're used to. So providing flexible studios, but as well as like little light warehousing and that sort of thing. Then more traditional landlords that we've seen. So people like large enterprises like IKEA, they've started to introduce flex into their portfolio. So it could either be part of their building or a new asset that they're managing themselves or outsourcing. And I think regardless of the type of business, all of them need a kind of reliable technology partner, NCG or otherwise, to design, deploy, and support their kind of physical and digital infrastructure, because it underpins these kind of new ways of working and gets them to attract tenants and ultimately monetize their space.
Indeed, and as ever, it's almost impossible to perhaps talk about this topic without mentioning WeWork. But given that the very public rise and fall of WeWork, what do you think that if I can use the phrase saga, what's that had on the industry as a whole? What effect?
Yeah, I mean, look, WeWork, they didn't invent the flex industry. There were many operators doing this before Adam Newman came along, but they massively popularized the concept. They brought it to the forefront of people's attention, and kind of younger generations, they were more vocal about the kind of things they demand and expect from an office space. So, I mean, I suppose they've had a positive impact, to be honest. They massively raised the bar for what a flex office could and should be.
And Caleb, I mean, following on and staying on the kind of the WeWork story, the WeWork saga, what's your perception in terms of the impact it's had on landlords in terms of their behaviour, their level of caution, perhaps around the structure of some of the actual flex legal agreements? What's been the kind of that legacy, if I can use that phrase?
Look, first, I think I'd like to commend WeWork for getting brand and market fit right. They might have had the wrong business plan and many other issues that we've all seen and well documented in TV shows. But they did create a brand and a product that customers loved. And quite frankly, until their downturn, the real estate industry loved them too. Brokers made a lot of money on that lease arbitrage model that WeWork deployed. Here in London, remember, they were paying over market rents and signing 20-year leases. It was like, it's kind of like watching the rise of Tony Montana in the movie Scarface. WeWork was the white powder for landlords and brokers. And, while everyone was getting hooked on that drug, they overlooked the change in demand for office real estate from customers. Just a couple of years ago, I remember consulting with some landlords and pitching management agreements as an alternative to WeWork to meet this change in demand and not act and to balance the risk. But it was like the end of Scarface when Tony Montana had all that white powder on while his enemies were storming his mansion. It was crazy. But fortunately, most landlords are off that drug now and are leaning into flex. And even if they're a little bit still hungover on the WeWork saga, but management agreements are on the rise, and some landlords are launching flex products. So it's good to see.
Indeed. And staying with you, Caleb, I mean, obviously, COVID has I think it's become a cliche to talk about how it accelerated existing trends and obviously has shifted, the use of commercial real estate, particularly in quite a significant way. And obviously flex is part of that. But what are you seeing in terms of the way landlords are now looking ahead and when it comes to sort of changing their floor plates, looking at the way that they're designing or building or adapting their existing floor plates to accommodate this hybrid model now where it's flex, traditional lease structures, because clearly it's challenging a lot of asset owners and landlords to think very hard about how they reimagine their spaces, both in terms of new ones and retrofit.
Look, there's a range of products right now being created and designed into buildings, and I think it's fantastic to see people leaning into the future. You've got open plan areas with rows of desks for hot desking. You've got permanent stations for focus work. You've got lounge style seating and for social and collaborative work. Everybody says come into the office to collaborate. You've got spec suites for teams to have their own private offices on flexible terms. To me, these are all improvements compared to the past, but these are just products. They're not necessarily solutions. And I think the real estate industry has been selling white boxes as a product for so long. We really talking about selling solutions. What do people really need? And to me, that's what space as a service is about. It's about selling those solutions or services, as it says in the name. So we have to ask ourselves, what do people want? I said earlier, they want to go where they feel taken care of and where they feel they belong. And that to me is where many of the current products out there on the market fall short. Look, it's great to provide flexibility. It's certainly important. And we also need to create experiences to turn those spaces into places, though, destinations that people want to go to. And to me, I believe doing that is blending that traditional lease model with that flex business plan. So I spent the last 3.5 years flying around the world consulting with landlords to bring flex in, and often it didn't work because the business plan of the asset was several years in, and trying to wedge a flex business plan together didn't. So
exactly.
To me, this is what we're trying to accomplish at Brave. We think it's crucial that you have to deploy 6 pillars of space as a service across the entire building, create a fully connected experience, full stack workplace solutions, and I'm going to sound a little bit pitchy or salesy here, but it's brand led hospitality is what we're focused on. And you transform traditionally off white boxes, that static office buildings, you turn them into dynamic, multifunctional spaces that really focus on community at its core. And to me, that's the future. And I'd like to see more landlords doing that.
Indeed, indeed. A question to you, Charles. I mean, obviously, during and post-pandemic, there's been a lot of talk about, particularly larger corporate occupiers, splitting their workforce into satellite locations out of CBDs and having not only kind of hybrid working, but perhaps a much more distributed feel in terms of the physical footprint of their office space. I mean, do you think this has happened? And I guess critically, given that this is a discussion around technology, what part does tech play in this new kind of world of more distributed, mixed type tenures, as Caleb was chatting about?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in short, I think this has happened to an extent, and I think you do see more people who are splitting their time in the office, working from home a few days a week, but that working from home may not be their physical home. They may want to go to locations that are nearby their home. So we've seen companies like CoSpace, who are kind of set up specifically to cater to commuter type areas in places like Reading, Stevenage, and Milton Keynes. And I've seen a lot of smaller brands as well develop kind of just individual co-working flex spaces in tiny little towns, villages that are catering to those people who are just wanting a new space to work to on a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday when they're not going into the main office. We've seen companies like Newflex create more of their premium white labeled locations outside of London too. So it is in line with the recognition that not all of these large companies need to locate their operations solely in one city to be productive. And I think it's a good thing we've seen the market respond by providing a greater range of spaces in a much kind of broader geographic field, as I just explained. Then in terms of technology, for NCG, partnerships are key here. We work with a tried and trusted kind of group of technology installers, fiber providers, to make sure that we can deliver and support sites all over the UK, but across Europe too, because we need to have the same reliable service offering and similar kind of competitive pricing structures, regardless of location.
Indeed. And I guess a question to you both, back to kind of, I suppose, the business reality of this, because we're now seeing, despite the rise and fall of WeWork, overall, the number of flexible and co-working spaces is increasing, and I guess that there's a broad range of the kind of levels that those are being pitched at in terms of price point and functionality. But how are operators actually effectively letting these spaces? Because once again, we've got to balance supply and demand and the kind of spaces that different organisations might want in different places.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a need for differentiation in the market. I think there's quite a wide scale of flex office product, from cheap and cheerful co-working all the way through to luxury spaces like Fora, Tog, and Uncommon. And I think that range is hugely important, dependent on people's budgets and what they can kind of afford to go to. I think another good point is having kind of great front of house hospitality focused staff. anyone who's rented an office going in and just having a grumpy receptionist there knows kind of it can start your day off poorly, and the same's true in the opposite direction. So having that kind of hospitality focused staff, like Caleb mentioned earlier, it's as if you're walking into a hotel. They're happy to see you, they know who you are, they're welcoming you. It's hugely important. I think there's maybe increasing recognition that you need to spend money to make a bit of money. Certainly on things like robust space management platforms, solid Wi-Fi, user-friendly video conferencing systems, because they allow landlords and operators to properly manage their spaces and monetize them. And then I suppose one thing that Weedwork did very well, which we mentioned earlier, but just creating appealing spaces, baristas, plants, music, they're all great kind of drivers and getting people away from their desks and into the office. And from an NCG perspective, the underlying technology and its ability to kind of enhance the working experience is fundamental.
Yeah, certainly. Your thoughts, Caleb, on this, the channel to market and actually how people can effectively, like any real estate asset, make it pay.
I agree with everything Charles just said. I think when it comes to channels, I mean, every operator would love if customer inquiries came in directly from their own website. But look, brokers still play a huge role here. Traditional brokers and tenant reps used to consider co-working a necessary evil. But as demand for flex grows, so does their interest even. And, the solutions like Valve that's popped up, making it easy for the traditional broker community to manage flex requirements, like CoStar helps them source traditional space. But then there's also the traditional digital broker, and everybody knows Instant Offices or Instant Group. But there's challengers in that market now, what we call online platforms or aggregators who are growing massively share. There's companies like Hubble and Liquid Space and DeskPass, Tally, Pont. There's a growing number of these that are enabling operators to acquire customers through an Airbnb or a Booking.com style experience, which I think as people are used to using their phones for everything, that's becoming more and more relevant and even desired. But finally, and this to me is a bit, well, maybe even underrated right now, but I think it's going to grow, is events. Programming, curating, and hosting events is where, to me, the operator's brand gets to become amplified, and they can attract the specific type of customer that they want to do business with.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And in fact, staying with you, Caleb, I mean, obviously, one of the major selling points, the clues in the name is flexibility. And how are operators managing the whole kind of renewal cycle? Because clearly, whilst it's flexible, you kind of want it to turn into a long-term relationship, don't you? So it's a kind of slightly contradictory term in the sense, yes, it's flexible, but ideally, from a business perspective, you want these to be sticky tenants, don't you?
Well, it's funny you say that. I think we call ourselves the flex industry, and often many operators or landlords dabbling in flex aren't very flexible. So it kind of depends on the brand you're talking about. But I think most of the operating systems out there, like Nexodus or Office R&D, and there's a few others, they're quite sophisticated now. So operators who do embrace flex and who do want to provide customers what they want, they can let customers choose the level of access that they want, from hourly bookings to day passes to, month to month or longer commitments on larger spaces. It's really up to the customer. The technology exists to enable the ultimate flexibility. And, today's hybrid world, that's crucial for me, in my opinion. Why pay for more space than you need when you don't have to, right?
Indeed. And I suppose a question to you both, perhaps starting with you, Charles. I mean, clearly, in the UK market, I think we're technically out of a recession in terms of the technical definition of 2 quarters of negative growth. But clearly, there's huge pressure on a lot of both operators and occupiers in the current economic climate in the UK and other jurisdictions. What do you think that's doing in terms of behaviour and priorities for, I guess, both operators and for occupiers?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Obviously, something that's kind of impacted nearly every, if not all, operators and landlords. And I suppose cost is a huge factor there. So we, as a technology provider, work pretty hard with all of our operator customers and landlords to make sure that the technology we're providing still does what it needs to, that we don't blow their operational budget or CapEx budget straight out the water. It can be a pretty fine line to tread because there's many factors to take into account, like how much they can sell their connectivity packages for, or their resources that they've got for, like meeting rooms and that sort of thing. And there's some things that you can't compromise on, in my view, like having a robust Wi-Fi system or support for the actual space itself. Like Caleb just mentioned, the connectivity and space management platforms, things like Office R&D, Locale, and Nexus, they're the lifeblood of these flex businesses and critical to occupiers. These technology systems, they should be seamless and kind of almost unnoticeable by occupiers, easy to book meeting rooms, easy to connect to Wi-Fi, easy to have a pay-as-you-go membership, open doors with your phone. And I think kind of customers should only notice these things if there's an issue. They should just be a seamless part of their experience. So having kind of complete flexibility, like we have at the co-working space 22 Bishopsgate. So we've been working there kind of on and off for maybe a month or so. And then because they had all of those things I just mentioned, we ended up becoming permanent members. So it's just having kind of all of that stuff wrapped up and ready for people to use.
It is fascinating, isn't it? The kind of fundamental supply-demand, dynamic has changed in terms of people's expectation of the quality of space now, hasn't it? So, Caleb, same question to you, but what, given cost is clearly such a huge driver now. What are you seeing?
I think, look, the office has long been a talent attraction tool. I mean, I think every tenant rep, every landlord rep, every landlord will say that. But now it's even more important to provide a premium experience as a tool, since people can get work done really from anywhere, right? So why come into an office if the experience is worse than working from home or whatever you call working from home? So to me, back to the hybrid topic, despite some of the headlines most office customers are using right now about mandates, and I think flexible working is a perk. And some people aren't in the office every day anymore. So as lease events occur, there's a downward trend in density requirements, and often that means shrinking footprints. But it also means that for fast-growing companies who want to go into buildings that enable agility, those landlords and operators need to provide that, so they're not locked into a fixed footprint. Because as I said earlier, why pay for space that you don't need if you don't have to? They don't want to pay for the space they're going to grow into. They want to pay as they grow. And I think the technology there is there to enable that. And I know firsthand working with NCG that it's possible, and it's helped my businesses. So that's my view.
Indeed. And I guess staying with you there, there's obviously a huge amount of pressure and debate on the impact of sustainability criteria on real estate now. And I guess I'm intrigued to know from your experience in the market, yes, people see it as important, but will they forego it if actually they can find a cheaper option? Is there a degree of realism that actually cost is still the fundamental driver, and that they won't necessarily go for that highest level of sustainability performance if there's a cost implication?
Andrew, we've been hearing about the flight to quality for some time now, and the bifurcation of the market between new highly amenitized buildings and the older, less attractive buildings. Companies are paying more for premium stock. That's a fact. But it's also a fact that many companies have sustainability targets, and the office can help or hurt their efforts to achieve them. So as companies use the office as a tool for talent attraction and retention, they expect the new or newly retrofitted buildings to help them reduce energy consumption and carbon emissions.
No, indeed. And just staying with you finally, or just to stay on this one point,